We often say, "I saw it with my own eyes," as if simply opening our eyes means whatever appears in front of us must be the undeniable truth. But here's the twist. What seems so obvious, this act of seeing, is actually the very thing most clouded by illusion. We see, and yet we don't really see things as they are. We meet the world through our senses, but what we truly live with are images, judgments, interpretations, and conclusions projected by the mind. So, do we actually see? This question isn't just a word game. It is the root of every form of suffering, every conflict, every misunderstanding humans have ever stumbled into. When our seeing is distorted, our actions go astray. When our seeing is distorted, we end up loving the wrong way, hating the wrong way, believing the wrong way. And sometimes, an entire lifetime can slip by under the weight of misperception without us ever realizing it. That is why the journey back to seeing as it truly is not a technique, not some new perspective to adopt. It is the unlayering of everything added on top of seeing. Like wiping away the dust from a mirror, it is a gradual clearing until reality reflects itself untwisted, uncolored before the eyes of awareness. Before our seeing is conditioned by psychology, by language, by the ego, we need to look deeper, back to its biological foundation. This is where perception begins. A beam of light enters the retina. It stimulates photoreceptor cells, producing an electrical signal. That signal travels to the brain, which processes it. This, at the rawest level, is the beginning of what we call seeing, a chain of unconscious mechanical events, devoid of thought and emotion. But even here, we are not seeing reality as an island. We're seeing a reconstructed model inside the brain. A close enough version, never the original. Human eyes don't capture everything. They only register a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. Beyond that lies an immense range of signals: infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, X-rays, gamma rays, all completely invisible to us. So, from the very first step, our seeing is already limited by the biology of the body. And it doesn't stop there. The image the brain presents us is not even the real picture. Light itself doesn't carry color, it's just electromagnetic waves of different frequencies. It is the brain that translates these frequencies into the experiences we call blue, red, yellow. When we say the blue of the sky, that's not an objective property of the sky. It's a subjective experience created when light waves of about 565 nanometers strike the cone cells in our retinas. This realization can be startling. What we call reality is only a biological map drawn inside the mind. Eyes don't see depth. The brain calculates depth by comparing the images from both eyes. Eyes don't see motion. The brain strings together still frames to create the illusion of movement. Eyes don't even see the whole scene clearly. Only the central region of the retina has high resolution. The rest is blurry, and the brain fills in the gaps with memory, prediction, and familiarity. In truth, biological seeing is neither objective nor complete. One could even say, the eyes only deliver scattered data. The real seeing happens in the brain, where those fragments are woven into a story, a mental image. When you look at a familiar face, you don't actually register every detail. You see a familiar person because your brain instantly lights up memory pathways. And so we must ask, at that moment, are we truly seeing the person before our eyes? Or are we only seeing the story our mind is telling us? But here's the deeper question. When you look at someone, are you truly seeing them? Or are you just seeing old images recalled by your brain? Worse still, our visual system is incredibly easy to fool. Optical illusions can mesmerize us, backgrounds can be mistaken for objects, and sometimes we even see things that don't exist. The brain loves to optimize information. It trims, simplifies, corrects anything that doesn't fit with its existing belief system. In other words, human seeing is not only limited, it is edited and subjective from the very level of biology. Now, this doesn't mean we should completely deny natural seeing. Rather, it highlights something important. Even before ego, prejudice, or language intervene, our seeing is still not reality as an island. It is already a processed biological representation. Think of it like watching a movie on a screen. You forget that what you see is not the actual event, but merely light emitted from pixels. Biological seeing is exactly that. It's the first step toward misunderstanding, if we don't recognize its limits. Only when we acknowledge that we're looking through a limited, conditioned tool can we remain humble enough not to jump to conclusions, not to cling too quickly to the thought, "I'm seeing it right." That humility is the very foundation for opening into a wider kind of seeing. A seeing not bound by the retina, not manipulated by neural signals, but a direct seeing, unmediated. Because if biological vision is already a reconstructed version of reality, then psychological vision adds another, even deeper filter, one far more subtle, personal, and complex. We humans don't just see the world with our eyes and brains. We see through the past stored in our minds. Every memory, every experience, every wound, expectation, and unresolved emotion, they all act like lenses. They tint everything we perceive, so what we see is no longer pure reality, but a reflection of our own inner psychology. Take, for example, someone who has been betrayed in the past may view every friendly gesture with suspicion. Someone who grew up in scarcity may see danger in even the most ordinary situations. A child raised under constant criticism may carry a sense of inferiority, coloring every relationship they encounter throughout life. In this way, seeing is no longer direct awareness. It becomes a projection of the unhealed inner world. Modern psychology has a word for this: transference. It's a mechanism where we unconsciously project past emotions, memories, or beliefs onto others. But long before psychology, ancient meditation teachings had already spoken of this. Humans do not see others as they truly are. They see others through the filter of their own minds. A mind filled with wounds, desires, and fears will always distort perception until those layers are brought into awareness, understood, and released. And it's not just old memories. Even temporary emotions can hijack our seeing. When we're angry, the person in front of us instantly becomes the cause of our suffering, regardless of the truth. When we're in love, we may idealize the other so completely that we stop seeing them as a real human being, only as the perfect image we've created. When we're afraid, we see threats everywhere. When we're lonely, everything is viewed through the lens of needing to be loved, making us more vulnerable to illusion than to reality. The truth is, we never see objects as they are. We see ourselves through them. Every act of seeing is colored by an inner need. When we crave success, the world looks like obstacles or opportunities. When we long for recognition, others appear as competitors or judges. When we yearn for peace, every disturbance feels like a threat. Seeing is never neutral. It always serves some hidden need within the psyche. And need itself is the very root of illusion. Because when we desire a certain outcome, we selectively notice signals that confirm it and ignore the rest. This is what cognitive science calls confirmation bias. We only choose to see what matches our desires, beliefs, or goals. And because of this, we never see reality in its wholeness. What we see is only a fragment, distorted by our needs. Psychological seeing, therefore, is not free. It is conditioned not by the outer environment, but by the inner content of the mind itself. It is driven by layers of craving and fear, most of which we are not even aware of. And here's the dangerous part. These layers often operate in the unconscious, which means they interfere with our seeing even when we believe we are being objective. Now, let's add another element: language. Language is perhaps the most powerful tool of thought. It allows us to communicate, to shape ideas, to create concepts, and to preserve knowledge. But because of that power, language is a double-edged sword. It doesn't only help us describe the world, it can also cover it up. We stop seeing things as they are. We only see the name, the definition, the concept attached to them. Most of the time, we are not in direct contact with reality. We live inside a shell of words wrapped around life itself. Take a simple situation. You see a flower. What happens in the mind? In an instant, the brain labels it: rose, beautiful, red, fragrant, memory of the past. Suddenly, all these ideas rush in, filling the space between you and the flower. And at that moment, you are no longer seeing that flower. You are only seeing a collection of familiar descriptions, things you learned, things you remembered, things you've carried from the past. The flower is no longer the present reality. It becomes the already known. By its nature, language is a system of abstraction. It creates labels to group together countless unique experiences into one pattern. For example, when you call something a chair, you've already skipped over thousands of differences between shapes, textures, materials, and feelings. All that remains is a single keyword, a convenient simplification for thought. But that very convenience robs each moment of its living uniqueness. You no longer see this chair here, now. You only see a generic unit of chair inside the conceptual system of your mind. And it's not just objects, emotions, people, and even our own sense of self. We see all of it through the filter of language. For example, the moment someone hears the word liar, an entire storm of judgments and emotions comes alive in the mind. But that label says nothing about the person's context, their psychological process, or their deeper nature. It is simply a sticker. And once the sticker is attached, our seeing closes down. The mind no longer listens to reality with openness. It starts operating according to the pre-made map. Language makes us see through concepts, not through direct awareness. When we call someone friend, enemy, lover, monk, or teacher, we are already trapping our seeing inside a frame. That person is no longer a living phenomenon in front of us. They are just a role, a character inside the narrative of our labels. From then on, everything they do will be interpreted through that label. It will no longer be observed freshly. And the more we learn, the more we accumulate vast systems of language. Technical terms, theories, philosophies, even religious doctrines. But if we don't see the limitation of language, this treasure becomes a barrier. Someone experiences a passing state of mind and instantly labels it impermanence, ego, consciousness aggregate. But in doing so, they are no longer touching the living reality of the moment. They are only touching the idea of it. Instead of fully living with a raw experience, we so often reach for concepts. We try to explain, to control, to avoid direct contact with what island. In those moments, language no longer serves as a tool for understanding. It becomes a tool for hiding. Seeing through language is already conceptualized seeing. It is fragmented, boxed in, stripped of its vitality. It is no longer a fresh encounter, it becomes an act of finding the right word. But the world does not need to be named. It needs to be lived, touched, and entered into with presence. And that only happens when the mind lets go of its habit of wanting to understand through words, opening the possibility of an encounter beyond meaning. Throughout the history of philosophy, one question has haunted the deepest thinkers. Can we ever see reality as it truly is? And the further they pursued this question, the more unsettling the discovery. Every act of human seeing is bound by the structure of perception itself, which means that what we call the external world is always shaped by the observer. We never meet reality directly, what philosophy calls the thing in itself. We only live inside a world already filtered by perception, thought, and conceptual frameworks. Immanuel Kant laid the foundation for this recognition. He distinguished between phenomena, what appears before us in experience, and the noumenon, the thing as it is in itself, independent of human perception. According to Kant, we can never know the noumenon. Everything we experience is already organized by the mind's built-in templates. Space, time, causality. These are not properties of things themselves. They are the operating system of human cognition. So, the world as we see it is not ultimate reality. It is a version structured to fit the capacity of human knowing. Later, Heidegger took this further. He emphasized that human beings are not detached observers peering out at the world from the outside. We are always already inside it. This means every act of seeing is shaped by our participation in the world, by our anxieties, our hopes, our judgments, our existential moods, even if we don't realize it. Think of it like this. One person standing at a crossroads in life will see a summer rainstorm very differently from someone who has just buried a loved one. The rain is still rain. But the seeing changes not because the rain itself has changed, but because the living world within the observer is shaping perception. We do not simply see the rain. We see my rain. Phenomenology makes this clear. Every act of seeing is a co-creation between subject and object, between seer and seen. If every seeing is conditioned by the subject, then is there such a thing as an absolute objective seeing? Most Western philosophers concluded, no. Absolute seeing does not belong to humans. Our perception, no matter how sharp, remains a phenomenon within the manifest world. It cannot penetrate to the deepest essence of reality. While the West, through reason, uncovered the limits of perception, the East approached the same truth through direct experience through meditation. Meditative traditions speak of a seeing beyond the split of subject and object, a seeing where the seer is gone. Not I am seeing, but simply seeing island. And strikingly, both phenomenology and meditation, though, from two very different traditions, arrive at the same insight. Ordinary human seeing is always an image, not reality. As long as the ego exists as a center, seeing will always be distorted by that very center. Heidegger said, "Being is forgotten." Zen masters say, "The one who sees is the greatest veil." Two voices, one truth. From this perspective, in the depths of philosophy, the task of seeing as it is not just difficult, it may be almost impossible, if we continue to look from the standpoint of a separate self. Philosophy describes human seeing as conditioned by cognitive structures, by existential moods, by language, by thought, by personal history. We do not see the world. We live inside a version of the world shaped by the architecture of our own consciousness. And that is why every act of seeing must be questioned. Not to dismiss it, but to recognize its limits, its relativity. When we finally see that our seeing is never pure, that very insight opens a door through which pure seeing might appear. Not through effort, not through sharpening perception, but through the silence of the observer, through the letting go of all structures of positioning. In Buddhist teaching, seeing is not just another sense function. It is the foundation shaping the entire process of perception, action, and suffering. The Buddha never taught people to see more. He taught them to see rightly, and even more importantly, to see purely. Pure seeing is a seeing untainted by asava, the subtle outflows of the mind, craving, ignorance, clinging to views. These are the currents that constantly condition perception, that make it subjective, that cloud it with ego and desire for existence. Seeing under the sway of asava is not completely wrong, but it is always tilted in favor of the self. It may appear sharp, sophisticated, brilliantly reasoned, and yet it remains inside the framework of ignorance. A person may uncover laws of the universe, may analyze phenomena with science, reason, or philosophy. But if that seeing still arises from a mind seeking to grasp, to control, to prove, to possess, it is still bound by the currents of defilement. The Buddha did not deny worldly knowledge. He simply pointed out, that kind of wisdom cannot free us from suffering. So what, then, is a seeing unbound by defilement? What is pure seeing? It is the kind of seeing that does not arise from the ego, that is not clouded by craving, not pushed by fear, not entangled by attachment. It is a seeing without agenda, without personal goals, without a seer, standing between the phenomenon and its essence. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses of the Buddha, there is a recurring emphasis on knowledge and vision of things as they really are. This means seeing phenomena exactly as they are, no more, no less. No judgment, no embellishment. This is not theoretical knowledge. It is direct, immediate, total perception where nothing stands between the mind and the thing seen. To reach such seeing, the practitioner does not need to gather more information. Instead, they must gradually remove what obscures it. This is the process of refining away the three basic outflows of the mind. Kamasava, the taint of sensual craving, being bound by attractive objects. Bhavasava, the taint of becoming, the thirst to exist, to become someone or something. Avijjasava, the taint of ignorance, not knowing reality as it is, leading to distorted seeing. For example, when someone sees another person's success, if the mind still contains sensual craving, it will see that success through desire, either envy or longing. If the mind still contains the outflow of becoming, it will give rise to the thought, I must also become like that, stirring a chain of restless striving. If the mind still contains ignorance, it will interpret success as a personal achievement tied to identity, luck, or fate, rather than seeing it as a dependent arising of causes and conditions. In all three cases, the person does not see the event as it truly island. They see only the shadow of their own mind projected onto the event. By contrast, a person whose seeing is untainted by these outflows looks at phenomena with spaciousness, without judgment, without possession. When they see someone suffering, they are not entangled in pity or sorrow. They simply see suffering as it is an expression of dukkha, and from that recognition, compassion naturally arises, but without clinging. When they see someone making a mistake, they do not fall into condemnation or self-righteousness. They simply see an action arising from ignorance, like a gust of wind passing through the sky. Such seeing is not cold or indifferent. It is a seeing that has gone beyond the ego's possessiveness. In the Abhidhamma, the process of perception is analyzed step by step. Contact phassa, feeling vedana, perception sanya, volition satana, consciousness vijnana. At every step, there is the danger of the outflows seeping in. If the practitioner is not mindful, the initial seeing is quickly swept into the whirlpool of liking, disliking, wanting, rejecting, explaining, and identifying, finally ending in action and karma. But if, from the very beginning, seeing is simply seeing, without addition, without ownership, without interference, then the cycle cannot start. That is why the Buddha taught, when seeing form, know it as form. Do not think, this is a person, this is me, this is mine. Seeing is simply seeing, nothing more. To maintain such seeing requires a mind of profound stillness, clarity, and sharpness. This is not a dull state, but a deeply alive awareness, where the mind does not chase after any object, whether attractive or repulsive. This seeing does nothing, yet it illuminates everything. It does not try to change the object, but by its very presence, ignorance dissolves. Such seeing does not come from learning, analysis, or technical methods. It is the natural fruit of inner transformation, where the ego gradually dissolves and seeing itself becomes pure. The Buddha called this pure vision, the seeing of a mind no longer rooted in ignorance, no longer beginning and ending in delusion. And perhaps this is the very seeing that our initial question was pointing toward. A seeing not filtered through the self, not driven by desire, not veiled by ignorance. A seeing that is itself light. When such seeing arises, it needs no validation. It does not grasp at an object. It shines on its own, an unconditional radiance of awakened wisdom. And in that clarity, there is no longer any need to call it right or wrong seeing. There is only seeing as an island. Today, we have walked together through the first arc of this exploration. From biological seeing, to psychological seeing, to seeing through language and thought, and finally, to the seeing free from outflows. All of it points to one profound truth. What we usually call I see is often only a reflection of the self, not a direct encounter with reality. We do not need to see more. We only need to see without adding anything, without memory, without expectation, without a role to play. And when seeing becomes that empty, reality is no longer something to be understood. It becomes something to live with. Silently, naturally, deeply. If today's reflection touched something in you, share your thoughts below, whether a question, a personal experience, or even a point of uncertainty. We always read, listen, and each week we dedicate time to respond in a special episode. May you be awake enough to see, and empty enough to hold on to nothing. Until next time.